Alright, you guys, we hate to be the bearer of bad news and we want to stay positive as much as we can, but if we're going to maintain our credibility, we need to call a spade a spade. Right now, we are witnessing the ATF headed by Patel blatantly ignoring a judge's ruling, and it's causing uproar among the few who have heard about it. Every day, more details emerge about how legal possessions are being withheld by the ATF for questionable reasons. In this video, we'll talk about why the ATF's refusal to return lawfully owned forced reset triggers is more than a bureaucratic hassle. It's a threat to our Second Amendment rights. We'll dive into the new leadership under Bondi and Patel, uncover what these delays mean, and discuss how we can stand together to defend our cherished liberties. First, we need to look at what triggered this controversy. A federal judge ordered the ATF to return forced reset triggers to lawful owners from whom these items were seized. These triggers were taken under a flawed interpretation of federal law, with the agency incorrectly labeling them as machine guns. The court declared the ATF had overstepped its authority and required the return of every seized trigger by February 22, 2025. Yet the ATF has not been cooperative, leaving many of us waiting for our property with no clear timeline. One major issue is the ATF's demand for proof of membership in groups like the National Association for Gun Rights or Texas Gun Rights. The court never imposed such a requirement. It appears the agency is trying to compile a list of vocal supporters of the Second Amendment. Many are understandably wary of sharing personal data with an entity that has already mishandled our property. This added layer of bureaucracy feels deliberate. The ATF seems to be saying that if we want what was lawfully ours, we must jump through new hoops. That approach could set a damaging precedent. If a government body can seize items without proper cause, then require arbitrary paperwork to return them, our rights become vulnerable to further encroachments. Another source of anger is the background check mandate. According to the court, forced reset triggers are not firearms. They are components, not regulated items. Nonetheless, the ATF insists on checking if the claimant is prohibited from owning a firearm. We see this as a stalling tactic. These triggers were never classified as guns, and the court affirmed they do not meet the machine gun definition. The agency also cites administrability difficulties as a reason for the delay. This implies they can't figure out who owned which trigger. Given they tracked the items during seizure, this claim seems disingenuous. Returning the triggers directly would be the simplest path, yet the ATF keeps inventing procedures that complicate the process. Many of us have seen letters requesting membership verification in particular gun rights organizations. That request risks creating an informal registry. The court's judgment made no mention of membership. A government entity shouldn't ignore a judge's ruling, then tack on its own demands. This could pave the way for similar overreach in future cases if they face no pushback now. If you think we're overreacting or blowing this out of proportion, or if you feel like it's debatable, feel free to comment below. Let's talk about it. Going back to the topic, another baffling stance is the refusal to return triggers to people living in states where the device is allegedly illegal. The federal order said nothing about state-level bans. The ATF's job is to follow the judge's ruling, not pick and choose based on local statutes. If they get away with this, they could apply the same rationale to other accessories, potentially denying property returns under any claim of a conflicting state law. The leadership situation involves Bondi and Patel. Bondi oversees the DOJ and thereby the ATF. Patel serves as the interim director of the agency itself. Both promised reforms. This ongoing standoff suggests either they're unaware or unwilling to act quickly. Bondi, known for backing red flag laws, faces scrutiny from those of us who expected a true commitment to Second Amendment rights. Patel, who mentioned personal safety concerns regarding other federal entities, must still ensure that those under him respect the court's order. You just can't help but recall the ATF's history of questionable classifications. They have repeatedly shifted stances on arm braces, 80% lowers and more, often overnight. Each shift leaves lawful owners in a precarious position, wondering if they've suddenly become violators of federal law. We can't afford to let these patterns go unchallenged. Even though the court declared these triggers are not machine guns, the ATF still insists otherwise. They've referenced criminal cases in Puerto Rico that don't involve the triggers in question, seemingly to justify maintaining a discredited classification. When a federal judge rules against the agency, compliance shouldn't be optional. By clinging to an invalid assertion, They undermine the legal process and our constitutional protections. This situation highlights the importance of vigilance. Every time the ATF revises its definitions, gun owners risk prosecution for simply possessing items that were lawful the day before. That's why holding the agency to the court's directive is crucial. If we don't, we may see more seizures and more demands for membership lists or background checks. For those whose forced reset triggers were seized, contacting the National Association for Gun Rights or Texas Gun Rights remains a priority. These organizations have been pivotal in challenging the ATF's conduct. Keep them informed about any letters or demands you receive. If the ATF tries to sidestep the court order, these groups can guide you on the next steps. If the agency's slow rolling succeeds, it sends a message that federal rulings can be dodged. Imagine the next time a new accessory falls under scrutiny. We could see a repeat of this entire ordeal. Items confiscated, owners forced to provide extraneous proof, or undergo checks for components not even regulated by law. Such misconduct erodes faith in institutions meant to be held in check by our judicial system. There's also a real concern about a stealth registry. If the ATF is collecting membership information, what's to stop them from demanding even more data? We've seen forms that ask for personal details that have nothing to do with confirming ownership. We must not allow a federal body to skirt due process under the guise of administrative procedures. Bondi could end this by instructing the ATF to comply fully. That means no more membership demands, no more background checks for parts. It means honoring the court's specific order to return these triggers without delay. Failing to do so raises serious doubts about her commitment to the cause she claimed to support. Patel, for his part, could use his interim role to enforce immediate compliance. If he wants to show a break from past leadership, he can demonstrate that the ATF obeys judicial rulings promptly. Waiting or citing confusion only cements the perception that the agency believes itself above the courts. We must also remember that the Second Amendment is not a privilege, but a right, protecting our freedom to keep and bear arms. When agencies disregard court decisions, that right is put at risk. We need to stay vocal and united to prevent this from becoming a broader pattern. Each voice raised can help steer this outcome in favor of our fundamental liberties. The ATF might be hoping we'll tire of the fight. Bureaucratic delays often wear people down, but we can't let that happen. Every call, letter, or video that exposes these tactics adds to the pressure for them to fulfill their obligations. If we give up, it sets a dangerous example that federal entities can outweigh the public and ignore legal judgments. Some of us are worried about how far this might go if left unchecked. With each precedent set, the ATF gains more leeway to interpret regulations in ways that disadvantage law-abiding gun owners. Demanding membership info or background checks for a mere component could become the norm if this stands. I don't know about you, but this is certainly not a road we want to go down. Again, if you think I'm just overreacting, comment below. Let's have a friendly debate. Anyway, whether or not you ever owned a forced reset trigger, this is about government accountability. If the ATF can flout a judge's order here, it emboldens them to overreach elsewhere. We must stand together, share updates, and support those taking legal action against these abuses. Litigation can be lengthy, but it's often our strongest tool when agencies won't listen. We also need to look at the wider media landscape. Many major outlets fail to report on the complexities of gun regulations. That's why it's up to us to spread the word. Conversations with neighbors or friends can do more to shape public awareness than waiting for a headline that never comes. The more people understand these issues, the harder it becomes for the ATF to operate in the shadows. If the ATF remains defiant, courts could impose harsher measures. No one wants that scenario, but the rule of law matters. If an agency refuses to respect a judge's ruling, the courts may have to intervene again. While that might lead to some real consequences for those who ignore legal mandates, it shouldn't have to go that far. Compliance should happen voluntarily when a court speaks. We should be wary of misinformation as well. The ATF tries to justify its stance by alluding to cases or regulations that don't apply. The only thing that matters here is the final judgment stating these triggers aren't machine guns and must be returned. All else is an effort to deflect from that point. It's our responsibility to stay involved, informing each other about any changes or further barriers thrown our way. Each successful return of a seized trigger is a small victory for everyone who believes in property rights and the Second Amendment. If enough of us push back, we can show agencies that they cannot stray from legal rulings without consequences. The clock is ticking. Every day the ATF holds on to someone's property is a day of injustice. We have a solid judicial decision on our side, and we expect it to be carried out in full. Membership forms, background checks, and references to state laws are sideshows to the main event. A federal judge instructed the ATF to return these triggers, and that order needs to be honored. Remember, if the ATF can ignore one clear ruling, they could ignore others. The next time they label a component as prohibited, we might witness the same, completely unjustified refusal to comply with lawful directives. Our rights are too important to allow this agency's overreach to stand. Remaining determined is our best move. If we allow ourselves to be discouraged, the ATF's approach will work. We have to stand firm, insist on lawful conduct, and remind our leaders that their words about protecting the Second Amendment mean little if they fail to act in critical moments like this. Let's share resources, keep the lines of communication open, and maintain the spotlight on the ATF's actions. That way, we make it clear that we won't be deterred. These triggers must be returned to their rightful owners without needless interference. Doing so respects the court's decision and affirms that our rights are not open to renegotiation. Now that we've explored how the ATF is stalling, how Bondi and Patel could resolve this, and why it matters to gun owners nationwide, we encourage you to stay vigilant. Spreading knowledge helps defend the freedoms guaranteed by the Second Amendment. That's it for this video. What do you think? How do we hold Trump and Kash Patel's ATF accountable for violating this court order? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this video was helpful in any way, please like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.